Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back to the VET S.O.S podcast. Here, sitting on the stoop, we about to get the scoop with a phenomenal individual. We was all off air talking for a long time. I said, "Oh, Julie, let's go hit the record button," because I know they missing out. But don't worry, we will recap everything. But before I start, remember, you do not have to drown in the sea of transition. Grab that VET S.O.S Lifeline. We are here to help. Make sure that you have this on record, or you can you can subscribe, you can forward on, because it's going to be an action-packed conversation today. So who do we have here? We have Miss Julie. She is a Navy spouse turned global storyteller. Wait till y'all hear about the book, because we're going to be talking about it, right? She's unexpected detour from California cattle country. I bet y'all didn't even know there was cattle up in them hills in California, but she went from California cattle country to the African continent. Her book, this is what we're going to be discussing: Dispatches from the Cowgirl. Julie recounts her life overseas as a diplomatic spouse, navigating camels, cocktails, and cultural curveballs in some of the world's most complex environments. Y'all want to know where? Cameroon, Nigeria, Djibouti, and a couple of more. Julie brings humor, humility, and a fresh perspective to the conversation about transition, identity, and purpose beyond borders. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, this is the Dispatches from the Cowgirl author, Miss Julie Tully. How you doing today, Julie? Greetings.
Oh, Kings, thank you so much. I mean, really, and I know you alluded to the fact that we spoke off camera. I want to hire you as my hype man forever.
There we go. I'm excited. Let me know when and where. I'm right along.
Right.
So this
but
is going to be.
Thank you so much for having me on.
No, this is going to be a great conversation because a lot of times, we talked about it before we hit the record, but a lot of times people don't understand what it means to be in this type of environment and then living in the environment and then coming back out and trying to retell the story so where others could understand how awesome it was, even though from the outside looking in, right? So I just want to say thank you, one, for putting this book together, and two, for taking the time to actually, as you said, putting your memoir into publication right here.
Thank
I
you.
know a little bit about you because you sent me the bio. I read the book. We're gonna discuss in detail. But what's the scoop on Julie? I know the listeners and the audience wants to know.
Oh my goodness, the scoop on Julie. Let's say in a nutshell. So I born and raised in Northern California. I am the 5th generation of a cattle ranching family in California. All of that, thought that was going to be my life. I thought that I was going to be a cowgirl or something within the cattle industry, the beef industry, and that was who I was going to be. But like many, many great stories, love entered the equation, and I married into the military, and I married a naval officer. Let's just condense this down. His naval career took me all over the world. We actually ended up spending about 2 decades overseas. We have now returned back to the United States. We live in California once again, and he is newly retired from the military. So I guess in a way, I'm newly retired from the military as well, and transitioning into a full-time career of being a storyteller and an author.
Wow. So definitely now this is the time where we're going to crack this thing open.
Oh, no.
I look, the way how you broke down I don't even want to call it chapters. I call them sections, right? Part 1, 2, 3, and 4. It's chapters, but the way how you broke it down for some people, and definitely my memory to understand is sections, right? Because when I talk to people like, oh, how was your time in the military? I said, well, okay, like when I was a young person in the military to an older person, like I have different phases, just like in life. You have going to high school, and then you have the college phase, and then you have your first job, your first heartbreak. That's the way how my brain is, and this is how I took how your book was established, because I really love the way how you have it structured to where the person could go to that part and it discusses that part and goes back to the main topic. But before we even start, I love the cover of your
Oh,
book. So
thank you.
what made you go and say, you know what, I need to put some cowgirl boots on there. I need to have this long road, and then definitely the colors, because what people don't understand is the color of the book, the to draw the reader in, to make them want to pick it up off of the shelf, is a
Right.
lot to say with the yellow, the orange, and the brown. So what's the scoop on that, Julie?
Oh my goodness. Well, I would love to take all the credit and tell you it was my brilliant mind, but those people who know me will know, say, oh no, that is not true. Um, so I am lucky enough, truly, truly lucky enough to be published by W. Brand Publishing, whose founder, Julie Brand, is an incredible industry recognized book designer on top
Mm,
of being a publisher. And so when it came to the point of actually, the book had been edited, it was ready to go, it had been laid out, and we needed to get the cover that would actually cause somebody to pause, pick up the book, and want to read it. Because I hate to say it, we always say don't judge a book by its cover, but that's actually what we do. With with
mm,
with books, readers judge a book by its cover. Um
mm.
so I went back and forth with Julie Brand on the cover design, and I said, in my mind, I I am a child of the 70s and 80s. In my mind, I still saw the old Banana Republic t-shirts from the 1980s that had those
Right.
wonderful throwback vintage designs of Africa and India and, parts of South America and stuff like that. And I said, is there a way that we could take and pull that into my story?
Mm,
And she said, sure. So, with her brilliant design chops, I mean, absolutely brilliant, award winning design chops, this is the cover that we landed on. And I knew she sent me 3 versions of this
mm,
cover. They were just, slightly different little tweaks.
mm.
And I was actually on vacation getting ready to get on a plane, and I opened up the email with the 3 versions, and it's like, one of these is right. One of these
Right.
is the cover. I don't know exactly which tweak I want right yet, but that is exactly what I want my book to look like.
Wow. And if you look at dispatches from the cowgirl
Mhm.
through the glass with with a Navy diplomat's wife. But it's not even that. You put in there a memoir.
Yeah.
That's why you call it memoir and dispatches. Like, why did you choose that right there to tell your story? A memoir. Like, for me, I'm like, oh, a memoir, like you sit down, you have this something that reflect. Like, for me, when I
Uh-huh.
see memoir, it's like a reflection.
Okay. Yeah. I get that. I so so here's the thing. Um I came from the world of public relations and marketing. That was my
Mm,
first career, and I grew up in a family of storytellers, and I came from this world where it was literally my job to craft messages and stories. But when I became a military spouse, this was still a time when social media didn't exist.
right.
This is, pre-Facebook, pre-internet almost. Um, not aging myself too much, but a little. Uh, and we as spouses especially were told, you know, keep yourself small. Don't make too much of a deal of who you are. Don't tell your stories too widely unless they fit into a neat
Mm,
little box. And the public relations side of my brain kept thinking, but there are so many great stories that would help us make our world more relatable to the average American citizen. And
right.
the dispatches part of that title was actually how it came to be, in that when we first received orders, when my husband became a foreign area officer, and we first received orders to move to Africa,
Mhm.
I begged him. I actually begged him because again, this was this at this point, it was actually at the very beginning of Facebook. The very
Mm,
beginning. Most people still use things like MySpace or My Family. And I begged my husband, I said, "Can I write at least stories home to our family and friends, little vignettes to talk about our life, just to explain things to them?" And
mm,
we settled upon he knew I was dead set against, I was dead set on this idea. And we settled on this idea that I could write emails back home. And as long as I kept it,
mm.
contained to the best of my abilities, and as long as the stories were mine or from my perspective, and they were not
Right.
him, that I would do this. So these became dispatches that were sent back to family and friends. The
Nice.
memoir side of it was later on when one of my dearest friends, who was one of the first military spouses that I met, she kept egging me on, telling me, this is a book. You need to write your book. You need to write your memoir. And that was where the seed of it started.
Wow.
So, in a nutshell,
Wow. So what was your first cultural shock stepping into that because we gotta get right into it. Stepping into that
okay.
diplomatic life in Africa. When
Oh,
when you
wow.
sitting at the dinner table and he's like, hey, we have an opportunity. It always starts with that, right? We have opportunity to go somewhere where we haven't been before. So what was that like when stepping into that diplomatic role, going into another continent that you was already overseas. Now you going over overseas, right?
Yes, yes. Oh, my goodness. Um, it was incredible. I will say, I had come from a world, my family's ranch has been, it's been in my family since the 1870s. I grew up in a world where they were deeply entrenched in our community and the industry, and that I had gone, with my mom and my dad or, to events and stuff like that. And I knew the importance of showing up. And I knew the importance of being part of something that's bigger than yourself to make sure that things
Mm,
continue on. And then, like I said, I went into public relations and marketing. So there was always this in the back of my skill set. There was always this ability to embrace something a little bit larger, a little bit different than myself. I never in a million years would have thought that that took me into the diplomatic world. But like I said, my husband became a foreign area officer and he said, "We have this opportunity." And so we took it. It was a leap of faith, truly a leap of faith for us to
mm,
actually find myself standing on the African continent in our first posting in Cameroon, as part of the US Embassy, as part of the diplomatic corps, as Julie Tully, American citizen spouse of this diplomat,
right.
and just find myself in the most craziest of circumstances with heads of state and, heads of militaries and things that would knowing that things like if I did something or that if I
Uh,
said something, something came out of my mouth, that it could potentially have an impact on everything.
right.
That was insane. But at the same time, it was completely fascinating. And I think it's one of those we are just ourselves. And it's
Uh,
not that I had any special, that I was meant to be there or I had any special, truly special skill set. It's just I found myself there and I embraced it.
right. So you talk about going to Cameroon. What was
Yeah.
the time that tested your resilience the most? Because you're already
Oh, wow.
overseas, and now I'm sure you started to like probably look up where's Cameroon? What is there to offer in Cameroon? Like, how was that change, the beginning of I call it the resilience movement, right? Because now,
Yeah.
we talk about, right? You was young, you was
I
still
was
in early 20s, right? for the
No, no,
most.
no, no. I wish I was. I was
Oh,
closer to 40 by then.
okay, okay.
But still young. Younger, the me then would say, no, no, no. I was an adult. I was grown up. But now looking back, it's like, no, I was still young. I was naive. Um,
Mm,
that was a resilience period because even though I was so excited about moving to Africa, I had,
mm,
been fascinated with Africa as a child. I was so excited to be there. But at the same time, I was thrown into a culture so different than anything that I had known,
mm,
a country that did not speak my mother tongue.
mm.
French was the official language, even though there were people that spoke English, but there were also so many tribal languages for Cameroon.
Right.
So thrown into this country where I was adapting to the culture, I had to learn the language, but it had its challenges. I mean, I had to learn how to
Mm,
overcome, being put in sticky situations,
mm.
losing power all the time, driving in incredibly, challenging, challenging roads,
Right.
solely so that I could get to the grocery store or that I could get my son to school
Right.
and have some semblance of what we would consider a normal life. And it it you're thrown in, there's the saying is that you're only given the challenges that you can overcome.
Mm,
And I think that part of the resilience is just I walked into it excited, but I also walked into it knowing it's either sink or swim. If I
yeah.
didn't rise to the challenge, what could I do? And thankfully, I had a lot of friends and acquaintances there that were supportive, that were
Mm,
there to take me by the hand and say, "We've been here for a while. We'll show you what it's like."
mm.
And I had a support network. So,
Right. And that's one great thing of definitely going and being in that type of new environment, right? So uh, I know when I was overseas, a lot of people like, oh, we talked about, we was both in Germany at the same time. So, you
yeah.
come back home and people talk about like, oh, how was it in Germany? Like, is the Autobahn, are you always driving 200 miles an hour on that left lane? Well, not
No, not all
all
the time.
highways, right? Not all the time, right? Not all highways are that. So it's that misconception out there, right? Like one of my questions I want to ask, like, as a diplomatic spouse and living abroad, like how, because I know I would think like, oh wow, have diplomatic immunity. So you just say you driving your son to school and you's going to the
Yeah.
grocery store. In my mind, I'm thinking, oh, you'll have somebody to go to the grocery store for you. You have somebody
Yeah.
drive, because sometimes in the movies you see that, right? They have the driver
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So some of the misconceptions, like what as being part of that environment, like what are some things that you could share with us, like, hey, the misconception, no, I had to go take my son to school. I had to go pay, I had to go to the grocery, I had to figure out how to navigate the streets without GPS, by the way. I don't know, just off of
Yeah.
memory, right?
Yeah. Well, no, yeah. So what is it really like? Unveiled. Um, this is it was really interesting because like I said, I'm writing vignettes back home and telling people about
Mm,
our new life. And especially as military personnel, as a military family, people are like, "Well, are you diplomats or are you military?" And
right.
it's like we're both. Amazingly, we can
Yeah.
be both. Um, but people would write back when I would send a vignette home. They would send questions back, and they would ask these questions like what you're asking, and they would say, "Oh, but I thought you went to parties all the time, or I thought you had
Mm,
staff that waited on you all the time. That it was
right.
like, like living in Downton Abbey."
Right.
Um, and there were aspects of it that were very much like that. We did we did have house staff, but that was
Mm,
more of a culturally um it was a cultural expectation for anybody who came into the country or had the means. So even if you were you were Cameroonian and or wherever we were living, local, and you had the means to support somebody else. You hired
Right.
people because you had the means to lift others up. So yes,
Oh, okay.
we had people working in our house. Some people had drivers. We opted not to. It's
Mm,
so so to blow that myth out of the water, I didn't have a
right.
chauffeur. I drove myself. Um we had an old Jeep Liberty that we had bought when we lived in Germany, and we shipped it to Cameroon, and I drove that thing. I like to tell some people they laugh because they say, "So how did you drive?" And our son, who at the time was a very, young child, like 1st grade, he said, "My mom drives on the sidewalks."
Hey,
Um,
sometimes you gotta you gotta
yeah,
get in
so,
where you fit in, right?
this concept of what you see in the movies and the diplomatic, you know, cocktail parties and events and having drivers, yes, those exist, and that was part of my life to some extent. But also at the same time, I was put into environments that were completely different than anything that I had
Mm,
experienced before. And I had to drive myself around and I had to maintain safety. And occasionally that meant, jumping up onto a sidewalk with my car and driving on a sidewalk and doing things that would raise people's eyebrows here in the
right.
United States. Um, I also, found myself at dining tables with, very
The heads
high
of
ranking
states, right,
people with crystal and silver in china. And,
right.
and sitting there in evening gowns. It, it it's a very complicated world.
So one of the questions I asked before we started talking was, when I was going through the book, I was like, wow, I love the way how you do the storytelling, right? Because it's very humoristic, laughter, definitely coping in high stress environments. Because one of the questions I asked, I was like, you named your cat too. And I said, what's the story behind cat two? But you shared the reason
Oh
why.
my
And
goodness.
and and I'm sure people probably like, what do you get the book and you'll understand what I'm talking about when
Yeah,
Julie
no
talks about cat
spoilers
two.
by the book.
Yeah. So just that storytelling it makes it's like a stress reliever, right? It kind of like
Yeah,
to release the high stress because I know it's definitely a high stress environment, like you said, different language, different
yeah,
culture, hours are different. So if you're trying to contact somebody back in the States, the time zones are different, so you're trying to get aligned with that. um it's just a whole lot of changing back and forth.
yeah.
So what made you go like, you know what, I have to story tell this with humor because this is how I was coping over there?
I would love to say that there was some grand reason why Kings, but there was not because that's just humor is just part of life.
Mm,
I
yes.
the stories I did not tell them in any way different than actually they happened.
Right.
The fact that I, am often the butt of my own joke in my stories, um, or that there's a lot of humor or something, that's just what happened. And to me, as a storyteller,
Mm,
um, and as a non-fictionist, as somebody
mm,
who really truly embraces telling the true stories, it's part of life. And that's
mm,
the beauty of being a human is that there is humor and there's intrigue and there are ups and downs. And like you said, it's stress relief too.
mhm,
I wanted to be able to somebody reading either the original dispatches that we sent
mm,
back or the book now. I wanted them and still want them to feel like they're sitting there just like you are with me right now, Kings.
yeah.
And we're able to laugh about things because that's the way it is. Or you're able to cringe when I tell you, a bomb went off less than a mile from our house and shook the windows and
Yeah.
stuff. I want people to feel like they're there with me.
Yeah. And feeling like people are there with you is all about building communities, right? And definitely,
Absolutely.
and we talk about that overseas, right? 'Cause I tell you, I was stationed at a
Yeah.
very small place, stateside, but I compared, I say it's like living overseas but stateside. So how has that building that overseas community out when you was being in the diplomatic world? Like how did that play out? Like how was that intense? Was it hard? Was it easy?
Um, well, I understand the core audience of this
Mm,
podcast, but hopefully they can bear with me for a second, and I'll refer. It was like being in the Gilmore Girls. And if you know anything about the Gilmore Girls, and if you don't, please look it up. But it's set in a very small town in Connecticut, and everybody knows everybody's business.
mm,
They all come together and they all support each other. But at the same time, you can't escape from everything. It's living in
mm.
a fishbowl. And that to me sums up one, it sums up the military life, especially overseas, but it also sums up the life that we were leading at very remote locations where sometimes there were, you know, less than less than 100 Americans in one
Wow.
place, and we became our own community. Um,
Mm,
it is literally like you're living in a small town where everybody
mm.
knows each other.
It's like
But
a
the but at the same time, it's like we were talking about, you build a community and your community is there for you. And yes,
mm,
you have those that you don't really get along with and those that you get along really well with, but in the end, it's a community and you take care of yourselves and you look after yourselves.
mm. Taking care of yourself and looking after yourself. So, total space. You said about 11 years in the diplomatic space. So Cameroon, Nigeria, Djibouti. Um, so after Cameroon, you said, okay, y'all got on to Nigeria.
Yeah,
So how was that experience, right? Because usually it's like one tour, or you do diplomatic thing, one tour, and then, but yeah, you had a good run. You
we
went
had a
to
really good run.
yeah.
We always like to, my husband and I, we are more what we would call a unicorn in the
Mm,
community that we came from, because generally speaking, the military really likes to send you out, bring you back, send you
right,
out, bring you back. We ended up out for a long time, especially on the African continent. We did 3 back-to-back tours in Africa. So, yeah, we went from Cameroon, and when our detailer, um, sent us a note and said, "Hey, it's time for you guys to, to consider your next assignment," it was actually our son who at the time,
wow.
was just a young kid. He was 8 years old, and the detailer said, "Okay, I can give you an assignment to Millington, Tennessee, or Abuja, Nigeria." And our son's like, "I don't
Nigeria.
wanna live in Tennessee." So so we went to Nigeria,
Nice.
know?
And that's awesome. So you went to Nigeria, and then next time you're like, okay, hey, we had two good things. And then roll the dice, and now we're heading to Djibouti.
Yeah, because we just actually, I think what it in a way, one, there is a bit of an adrenaline rush when
Mhm,
it comes to not specifically the environment, but when you realize you're actually good at the work that you do
right.
and that you're in the right place. And by the time that we had gone through Cameroon and that we had lived in Nigeria, my husband and I are like, this is where we belong.
Right.
I could work alongside of him in many ways, which was really great as a military
Mm,
spouse, because spouses have to walk away from careers so often. So I felt like I
mm,
was contributing. He felt like he had found the place where he truly fit and belonged for the military. And so there was this adrenaline that went along with it. And when the opportunity
mm.
came up and presented itself to go on to Djibouti, we said, absolutely, we're willing to do this.
So as you go along, you're overseas, you're collecting, you're right, getting these dispatches together, and now you starting to put it in a binded form. So how has writing
Yeah.
this book helped your process of your journey? Like, because I know sooner or later, I'm sure somebody probably like, hey, Julie, you need to you need to write a book. And you probably kept pushing it on, like, no, I don't know. Who wants to read? Nobody's gonna buy it. All the we talked about earlier, right? The imposter syndrome, but
Yeah.
look, everybody, look what I have. So that means that she broke through the barrier and said, I'm going to write this book. How has it helped you through your process, like through your journey, right? Because it's like you said, being a unicorn, like, people, they might get one tour overseas as in the diplomatic world. When I told you I did 13 years overseas, they're like, man, how you pull that off? Like, hey, right place, right
It
time. Like,
happens.
it just lines up, and some people don't even get to experience the overseas part of the military, right? They usually stateside majority, just a small percentage get to experience the
Absolutely.
overseas, living overseas.
I, y- in all, we spent 18 and a half years overseas. And, but to get back to, I went from these stories to a book and a published book. And then it became not only stories, published book, it became an award-winning book. And people say, I get two reactions. And one is like yours, where it's like, how did you do this? Man, you got a book. It's great. And then I also get people who say, you had the audacity to do that. Almost a negative. And I realized that it all brought me to this point because that book is a culmination of an experience within the military world. And I know that there's a lot of elements to it, and it's my story as a woman kind of coming of age during this time in Africa. But it's also my experience as a spouse within the military community. And I feel that we owe it as members of the military, whether we are active duty, whether we are veterans, whether we are the children of the military, or, whatever role we play, we need to tell our stories because not only does it work to help us process everything that we've gone through, everything that we've done on behalf of our country, but it helps others understand it as well. And it really, to have my dear friends say, you need to put this in the book. The imposter syndrome was real. I was like, no way, there's nobody, it's one of those things that's kind of like, yeah, my mom will buy it. My friend that told me to write the book will buy it. My husband will get a free copy, obviously, but that's about it. But it became like this little nagging thought in the back of my mind was, well, maybe my story is worth being out there. And that gets back to this. We owe our stories out into the world. And as a natural bookworm, I had looked to others to read their stories about their way through the world, but I had never seen one like mine. I had never seen a book like mine about a military spouse that had done this. And so it kept building and building. And honestly, I will tell you, Kings, it was another military spouse that helped me bring it to life.
That's awesome.
Who is an editor and said, your story deserves to be told. And between her and myself, we brought it to life and put it out into the world. And so we kicked the imposter syndrome to the side, and I became a published author.
That is so awesome, Julie. I don't know if you realize how much that is encouraging people that's going to come across this podcast, listen to it, that's going to get a copy of your book. To show the resiliency, right? To show, like, you know what, maybe somebody do want, also like this, to get that encouragement.
Yeah.
So what would you say to someone about to make a major leap into the unknown? Like what would you tell somebody, like, cause right, this is part of the unknown for you, right? Cause you never written a book until you
No.
written a book, right? That's what I say. Hey, you never do something until you do it, right? So
And I didn't, like I said, I started out as a cowgirl.
Right.
And then I was in PR and marketing. I didn't start out my life thinking that I was going to become an author. I didn't see this. Everything that has happened to me in my life has led me to this moment, which, if you want to talk about leaping into the unknown, that is really it. When people ask, if they ask you or they ask anybody, do you have a regret?
No.
I don't have regrets.
Right.
I don't,
No.
because I know that they all get me to the place where I need to be. I can imagine, though, that the only thing that I would ever say I would have a regret for is if I didn't take a chance. My husband and I, we took a leap into the unknown when he joined the Foreign Area Officer community, when we left everything that we knew, when we took assignment after assignment overseas, when we took our child, who was tiny,
Right.
into cultures that were so vastly different than our own. Every single one of those were a leap. For me to take the next leap and say, I want to be a storyteller, that was also an unknown. And it's hubris also. it's me thinking, oh yeah, I can do this,
Right.
not knowing if I really could. But it's hubris. But also, now I am, the book was published in 2022. It covers the time period between 2010 and 2018. It was published in 2022. I am now the spouse of a veteran. We have, quote unquote, found our forever home. We are entering now over 6 months into this transition.
Right.
And I have taken another leap. And now on top of writing my own work, I am saying, I want to help others, like somebody like you, Kings, write your story and get it out into the
Oh,
world.
man.
And that is what it is.
Wow. And so when I was reading through the book, we as I tell people, when you're on the right track and you in good company is when you have a conversation and it feels like you know each other for years, right? I just met you
Exactly.
literally like 45 minutes ago, right? I just said we had a conversation, but it feels like we had this connection that and remember I talked about, like, it's like
Yeah,
running parallel lives that we don't even know
mhm,
exist, but then once we connect, like, wow, we are running parallel lives.
we
So
are.
one of my questions, like, when I was going through the book, I seen something that I was thinking about, like, that brought tears to my eyes, and I caught a chuckle. Like I said, Cat 2, hey, if y'all need to
Yeah.
know who Cat 2 is, get the book. Cat 2, Cat 2 will come out to you and understand. But when you think about, like, what was one of the parts, like, man, for me, it was the transition back to, as you say, back to big Navy, right? Because it wasn't the
Yeah.
Navy you left, it's the Navy that you came back to, which was different. So that resonated with me because I was thinking when I left for the military, here I am, a New York City kid, and
Yeah.
I did the military thing, and now I'm back. So I'm going back to New York City thinking I'm going to re-enter myself where I left off, and everybody went on to keep doing things. This 20 plus years later, I'm trying to revert back to when I first went in, and it's totally different. So I resonated with you. I understood what you meant by making that writing in your book. Like, it just felt, you know, that reintegration, I guess.
Yes. And to me, I, when when I've been invited to speak at different places, and they ask me, would I be willing to read, a section from my book? I always tell them, yes, I would really. I have no problems except for that
Mm,
end. I can't read that out loud.
mm,
Um, because it was reintegration, but there was a profound sense of loss, um, and of transition, which I feel is kind of like the theme of my life ever since I ever since I married into the military, and transition has just become part of it. But, we had spent, by the time that our tours in Africa had come to a close, in 2018, we didn't come back to the United States after Africa. We were then posted to Naples, Italy.
Mhm.
And so we were still overseas, like I said, we
That's
spent,
different. Yeah.
yeah, we were still overseas, but it was different. And it was the first time since 2004. This is 2018. It's the first time since 2004 that we had been on a big Navy base. We had been part
Mm.
of Big Navy. Prior to that, we had either been in embassies, we had done an exchange tour in England, we had been part of AFRICOM in Stuttgart, so with Army. But it was the first time we were back to Big Navy. And it was, it, it's that, it's that push and pull, because you're saying, like,
Mhm.
going back to where you're from. They've gone forward, and you are still in this one place
Right.
behind, but at the same time you've gone forward, and they're still imagining you as the
The same
person
person.
from,
Right.
and it was difficult. We went in we left the United States and left Big Navy very junior. We returned to Big Navy in 2018 very senior,
Mhm.
which was, the irony is not lost on me that, I'm going around the base and they're like, and I hate being called ma'am. I really can't stand it. But they're like, ma'am, you should know how to do this. You should know how to do that. And I thought, no, I don't, because this has been my life for so long.
Right.
And it's 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 that, seeing that path and seeing the transitions. And again, it gets back to, the more that we own our narratives, the more that we tell our stories, the more that there can be empathy. And so, like for you going home, going back to New York, you know, if the people there understood what you had gone through, they would have, an understanding that here's Kings, but he's not the same guy that he was then. For us, leaving Africa and leaving everything that happened to us there and the
Right.
world that we had, it, yeah, it really, it really gave me that drive to say,
Mhm.
I need to tell these stories. So,
Right. And so when I was going through the book, I always gonna revert back to my journey I shared with you. So when I was reading through your book, and the way how my brain is rewired now, I have to go through, and I tell people that, I said, this is how I go through and I read, but I kind of do a skim and I highlight portions that, like, man, this is me, like, this is me, to remind me I'm not the only one who went through a situation. So these are some of the quotes I took out of the book. I was like, wow. I said, I'm gonna have to share this with Julie because I don't
I
know.
can't
And
wait to
this is
hear it.
so the first one. You ready for this? I went
Yes.
from cowgirl boots to embassy receptions, but I never stopped being me. Remember, I told you I'm on a 45-hour fast right now. He's like, "Well,
Yes.
how can you?"
Yeah.
No, this is me, right? So I remember Sean Wells. He's the founder of VET S.O.S. He said, because I was nervous when first came on to be a part of the network. And I said, man, I don't know if people is gonna accept me because I'm loud, I'm excited because I keep telling myself I should not be here. Like I should not be here. Like I should not be here.
But
And I shared
obviously
you
you
my story,
should,
right? Because I'm
because
here,
you just said that a cowgirl from California has some similar story to you from urban New York
yes.
City.
And you said,
You're
but I never
absolutely,
stopped being me. So
yeah,
you never stopped being the cowgirl from North Cali.
no.
Even though you went overseas, like you're still in and like you said in your book, in your heart, you still, you're out there on the farm. Like, that's still you. That's internal you. Like, you are so that's one of the things I highlight. I say, wow, never stop being you, Kings. I say, she's
Yeah.
right. Never stop being you. And here's the other one. And when I share with the listeners and the audience, I bet you Julia's gonna laugh because what we talked about before I hit record. Here's another one. You ready for this, Julie?
Yeah.
Africa didn't just change my zip code; it rewrote my soul's coordinates. I'm thinking my zip code is 11225, right? That's how I come Brooklyn, New York. But how many other zip codes I had in this time span where it rewrote my soul, because it's like, okay, I'm here. I'm going to live in the moment. I'm going to be part of the moment. I'm going to enjoy the moment. I'm going to enjoy the now. And one of the things I tell people, because I had to tell this to myself, is, Kings, just make it to tomorrow. And people like, well, why you say that? I said, because if I make it to tomorrow, tomorrow would never come, because tomorrow turns into to today. So all I got to do is
Right.
make it to tomorrow, because it turns into today. So if I just tell myself that every day, Kings, just make it to tomorrow. Just make it to
Right.
tomorrow.
Right.
But wait, look, Julie, you know what I said?
But wait, there's more.
Sometimes Brazilians look like laughing at the absurd while standing in the ankle-deep red dust.
Yep, absolutely. And as somebody who has served in a lot of rough places, which I know you have, because you were telling me, it's true. You could be in the harshest environment, in the worst situation, as long as you just understand where you are and what you are and who you are, and also try to find just that absurd humanity of it all.
Yes. And it goes right into like I said, I was like, man, your book is bop, 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 bop. I was like, oh, here's another way, here's another way, here's another way. But wait, there's more. Home became less of a place and more of a mindset, right? Because
Yeah.
I had to think like, okay, I used to tell myself I'm just a kid from Brooklyn, right? Like everywhere, but it's more of a mindset. Is, definitely as a military family, you go somewhere for 2 to 4 years, and guess what? You have to repack, relocate, retransmit, start all over again, meet new friends, find out where the grocery store is, find the direct route to the school, find the shortcuts. Without GPS, by the way, GPS is nice now, but back in the day,
It
all we
didn't
had was that
exist.
memory. It did, so just like that, more of a mindset.
It is. And you have to take it like that. And even now, like I say, you're talking about being a kid from,
Mm,
I am still the California cowgirl. I will always be that person. But at the
mhm.
same time, there's pieces of Germany that I carry with me. There are pieces of
Right,
Nigeria that I carry with me.
right.
There are people, there are experiences, there's food, there's everything. That is home. And that
Mm,
is what also home is, who you are too.
mhm.
And I carry bits and pieces of home with me at all times. Because
Yes.
home is a construct. Home is a construct. Yes, your home,
Mm,
the physical four walls around you. Yes, obviously. But the notion of home, like,
mm.
there's no place like home. Let's throw it to Dorothy right
Right.
now. Um, that's a construct.
Mm,
And it's something that cultures build up in their mind. And so the American culture, we love to say, oh, home is a physical place. Home is, we have the sentimental ads during Christmas, all that good
mm,
stuff. But home's a construct, and home is a very fluid, changing space. And it's
mm.
and it's infinite, and it can
Right.
contain so many places, so many experiences. So
Right. And one of the ones that really, 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 really hit home with me that we discussed earlier, and now I'm going to reiterate this right now because this is the best way to transition to what's next for Julie. Is you said this isn't just my story; it's a dispatch to every woman redefining home, one step at a time.
Yep, it is. That's that was,
Mm,
that was me writing that probably in 2019. So
mm,
yeah, let's fast forward 6 years. What does that
yeah,
mean? Um, and I hope the fact that it's stuck with you now, Kings, I hope
yeah,
that it's obviously going to be an evergreen thought that I can pass on. But what does that mean to me now? Um, we returned to the United States after 18 and a half years in 2022, back to my home state of California. And my husband retired last year, um, in the middle of 2025. So we are now freshly veteran.
nice.
But at the same time, every day I wake up and yeah, the whole veteran experience, that that's an experience every day. That's
Right.
transition every day, is to remind ourselves that he's not wearing a uniform and that I am not an active duty spouse anymore. But the transition home,
Mm,
so to speak, and moving forward and putting one step in front of another every day, putting my
mhm,
boots on every day and moving forward. What it's taught me, and what I hope that quote that you read helps other readers too, is to understand that there is no finite peace. It's,
right,
you're going to keep going, and it's a transition, and it continues on, and you don't know what's next. And I didn't know what was next in 2010 when I said yes to moving to Africa. I did not know what was next.
right,
In 2026, when we're recording this, I kind of know where I'm going and I know what I'm doing, but I don't really know what's next. And you know what?
right.
It's all good.
And you okay with it? Yeah.
Yeah,
At least we know it's
I'm
more
fine with it.
dispatches. I know because you did share, dropping that volume too soon. So I know that
Yeah, I'm
that
working on
that's
it.
on. That's awesome. So how can they get a copy? Where can they go besides Amazon? I know they could go certain places. Do you have a
Yeah.
website? Like, how can they get a copy of this and put this in their collection after they finish reading it
Oh,
and adding it to their life?
well, yeah, besides Amazon, so if you want to get a copy, you can head to my website, which is julietullyWriter.com. On my website is a link to get the book, not only at Amazon, but also places like Barnes and Noble or
Mm,
bookshop.org. You can also go to your local indie bookstore and request it directly, and they can order it for you. Or go to your library. If your library, if you're a library supporter, go to your library. And if they don't have it, request that they get it in. Um,
yes.
but yeah, that's how they can get it. And if they want to keep up with the rest of it, go to my website and find out how.
There we go. And definitely, y'all know another reason why y'all have to get the book? Because y'all have to get acquainted with Cat 2.
Oh, my darling cat. I I will break your heart at this moment, Kings, and tell you that my darling cat didn't make it out of Italy.
Oh,
Um, yeah, she lived a very, very good life, but she didn't make it out of Italy. But now, in her place, and because of her, see, this is how the world works. You never know what's next. But because of her, we now have two incredibly wonderful rescue cats that we picked up here
nice.
in California.
That's beautiful. Thank you for taking them, rescuing them, adding them to the to the Tully household, to the family. maybe they'll be in the next book. I like to
Oh,
see them in
yeah.
the next.
They'll be in the next book. Don't worry.
That's so awesome. And I just want to share with the listeners and viewers. Remember, you do not have to drown in a sea of transition. You heard it from Julie. Her story, her memoirs, is a definition of you do not have to drown in a sea of transition. Grab that lifeline, whether it be a friend, a family, a coworker, Julie, me, anybody. Grab and speak to somebody, because the longer you keep it bottled in, and just as I'm not only a client, I'm a member, right? you know, People are there. They want to help. They want to help. Not saying you have to take the help. Just know that help is there for you. And when you're ready, we are here. We love you. Thank you so much, Julie, for coming on. I
Oh,
greatly appreciate it. Thank you for being a part of the VET S.O.S podcast network. Thank you for coming on sitting on the stoop, getting a scoop about your book. I love everything about it. And don't worry, we're gonna be connected, because you're definitely coming back for the next version, and to
like I
come on for
said,
more.
I'm hiring you as my hype man for the rest of my life,
And
man.
look, I'm here. I'm ready. I'm ready to rock and roll. You just let me know when and where, and I'm there. So
Let's
I
go.
greatly appreciate it.
Oh,
Awesome.
thank you, Kings. It's been a joy.
Thank you, everybody. Until next time, take care. Peace.